was in the south of France on holiday with this kid, Dan, from my school. And his big brother had this mixtape, and it had on it One Step Beyond by Prince Buster, the original One Step Beyond, and Gangsters by Prince Buster. And it's basically the Scatolites under the name Buster.
So they're the two songs that both were eventually Madness and Specials, right?
Yeah. Madness did One Step Beyond, Specials did Gangsters was Al Capone. But it's the Scatolites, basically. Yeah. It's called Buster's All Stars or whatever, but same musicians.
So that's where you connected with the origins of the musicians who were the Scatolites.
And when I heard it, I was like, this is amazing. I just felt like this was so good, but I didn't hear that sound again for another 5 years. I was in a market and I heard it again later.
Would you say that's because that music wasn't particularly around? You couldn't really access it. We didn't have the internet. You couldn't really get it was a two-tone thing, like you said, but the original 60s stuff, particularly Scatolites, wasn't that.
No, not if you lived in Brixton or West or Portobello or something like that, one of those more kind of integrated parts of London. But where we were wasn't really like. I mean, there were record shops, but I don't know. I just wasn't exposed to it, and I didn't ever. I hear these stories about people going to blues dances in Nottingham or Coventry or whatever, and I didn't have that experience at all.
So you had this one blast of the Scatolites you're describing, and then it was like ages later?
Yeah, about 5 years later, I was in Camden Market and I heard the similar sound, and I went to the stall and the guy showed me a record and it was Don Drummond and the Scatolites.
And do you think that was the moment, like around then, that the seed was sown for your love of this music?
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's quite a thing, isn't it, to have a love of a music. It's a different thing to actually make your life about that music. How did that happen for you? Because lots of people are music fans, lots of people are into music, and they love it, and then they sort of move on, they get to other things, but you've really made this your focus.
This story, it's a good question. It kind of comes to get you. You don't sort of, for me, I didn't go looking for it. It just kind of grabbed me like a shepherd's crook like that around the neck and yanked me. And just sort of all quite organically, really. Just following my nose, following passion.
But was there a point where you thought, this is something, I'm going to do something with this? I'm not just going to listen to the music. I'm going to engage with it in another way and actually do something with it.
Yeah, definitely. Like I did a journalism course in my early 30s, trained as a journalist and spent like 6 months doing this journalism training. And while I was on that course, I did a little project and I thought, I'll do it about reggae and ska, just because you had to make a little magazine up, practical project. And while I was doing that, I already knew about the Alpha Boys School because I'd seen sometime in the 90s, Courtney Pine did a South Bank show on ITV on a Sunday night. He did a documentary about going back to Jamaica, and he went and visited the Alpha Boys School and interviewed Sister Ignatius. And I found out that a lot of these horn players and other musicians had been to this school run by nuns, and I found that interesting. Then while I was on that journalism course doing my little baby project, I found out Sister Ignatius just died, like literally, at that time. She died, and she'd run the music department for 65 years or something at the school. And I started talking about it I was just getting to know a few people who worked in film for the first time, documentary filmmakers, and they were all flipping out over the story, going, "Oh my God, you've got to do something with this. This is amazing. What, a nun who's,
So can you just pause and then just dive into tell us actually the essence of the story, like the Alpha Boys School, Sister Ignatius. What's all that about for people who don't know anything about it?
Okay. If you know nothing about it at all, basically it's like supposedly a reform school for kids. They used to call them wayward boys, but it wasn't just that at all. It was a lot of kids just went there because their parents wanted them to go there.
This is in Kingston.
In Kingston, and just let that person in. Oh no, it's not already in. Yeah, so it's a boarding school or a residential school run by nuns. It's not run in the same way now, but it was set up about 140 years ago. Because at that point there was just loads of sort of orphans on the streets of Kingston. You know, there was just terrible, terrible poverty, and they set up this school to indoctrinate them into Christianity. I mean, probably the politics of it were a bit, off. I'm sure, it was kind of missionaries. It was kind of creating fodder for the colonial system. All of that,
and then the music department.
Yeah, that came a bit later, but so they set up the school with industrial trades, so like woodwork and shoemaking and tailoring, and then they got this their band together. They started getting donations from overseas musical instruments, and they set this band up. And the idea was it was a feeder into the Jamaican military band. So they would have boys to go into the army to join the band. That was the original idea.
Is that because the actual Jamaican music scene as we know it now hadn't really
we're talking we're talking about the early 1900s.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, long before the Jamaican music
long
scene.
Before any of that.
Yeah. Okay. So you had this music department, and then that developed, and then eventually this woman, Sister Ignatius, joined at some point.
Yeah, so she took over the music department in 1939, I think. Mm-hmm. She was still a teenager. She became a nun. She went to the Alpha Girls' School. She became a nun, like straight after leaving. So she took her vows aged about 18, and then joined the staff of the Alpha Boys' School and stayed there for the rest of her life until she was about 85 or something. And she, for the whole of that time, ran the music department. So she oversaw generations of boys throughout their careers and stayed friends with them throughout their lives and saw them go on to become professional musicians. And there was this one generation, I think, well, from the 40s and the 50s, really, they were like, that was the jazz generation. And a lot of them went on to be hugely important and influential jazz musicians, and that's why I decided to write a book. And reggae musicians and ska musicians.
And that would be the book that you did with Heather Augustine?
Yeah.
This book here. Alpha Boys, Cradle of Jamaican Music. Do you want to say something about that? How that came together?
Yeah. I'll try and keep it brief. It's a 400-page book. It's got 50 biographies of different musicians.
Yeah, that's it. Do you want to say who's on that cover?
Yeah, you've got Sister Ignatius in the middle, Yellow Man, Leroy Horsemouth Wallace, Don Drummond, Rico Rodriguez, Lester Sterling playing trumpet, although he's more famous for saxophone. That came about. Actually, the story is quite interesting how it came about. I'll keep it as short as possible, but. So I did have an opportunity to film a Alpha Boys School reunion concert in Southeast London in 2007. 12 original Alpha Boys of different, well, mostly in their like 60s and 70s, came together for this reunion. It's a once-only reunion show, and I had heard about it, and I persuaded the promoter to let me film it. Did a 4-camera shoot. It all came together very kind of chaotically and last minute.
But this would have been one of the last kind of shows with those guys?
It's the only show they've ever done like that.
Right. A lot of those people who've died now, yeah?
Quite a few of them have died, yeah. And off the back of that, the person who I did it with, the cameraman who helped me, we got an interview with Chris Blackwell from Island Records, because Ben, his cameraman, he worked on a film that for Palm Pictures, Chris Blackwell's company. We basically got the green light to start this film and go to Jamaica. And I don't want to go into it too much because it's a long story, but it didn't go well in Jamaica. We went there in August 2007, and the whole thing was just a bit of a disaster. And it never got made. I came away with my tail between my legs. It was very sort of like first time ever doing anything with film. But I had all this material, you know, from interviewing some of these boys at the time of the concert and after that as well. So I left it for a few years. I just kind of.
So did you give up on it at that point? Did you always know you were going to do something with it?
No, I didn't. I gave up on it. I just thought, I'll leave it. Okay, forget it. It's too difficult, too complicated, too much politics. So yeah, I left it for a few years, and then, cut a long story short, I got an opportunity somebody approached me to do a book with a publisher in the States.
And that's how this Alpha Boys book
and then and in that period between originally attempting to make that documentary, in the ensuing years, a book suddenly appeared completely out of the blue about Don Drummond of the Scatolites. This incredible book by this American author, Heather Auguste, and it was absolutely amazing. The story, I've been waiting for this book for years, and I had no idea it was coming, but it was like the book that filled in all the missing pieces of the history of that time. And so the natural person to approach to write, I didn't want to do this book on my own when this publisher approached. So I asked Heather Augustine if she would write it with me. She said yes. The publisher turned out to be a complete flake. We didn't want to work with him. So we just did it ourselves, and we self-published. We wrote it over a number of years, just took our time. And then in 2017, we put it out there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing you kept going with this whole thing. And I want to just move it on quite a big leap, but how on earth did it get from this to a comic book? And what is your interest, if you have one, in comics?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a massive comic obsessive. Not like I was reading loads of comics, but just like any kid, I suppose, I was into comics when I was young.
We had comics around.
Yeah. I was always reading like the Beano and the Dandy and Bullet and
Snoopy.
Charlie Brown and Snoopy. I was obsessed with Charlie Brown and Snoopy when I was sort of like about 10. Had all the Peanuts volumes of Peanuts. I had 50 volumes of Peanuts books. So I liked comics, but I wasn't like into sci-fi comics or, you know, all of that stuff. But I just thought that Heather's book on Don Drummond really lent itself to a graphic novel. And it was just one of those ideas that came out of the blue. I had no idea how to go about creating one. But I asked her, I said, can I do a comic book? And to my amazement, she said yes. And that meant I had to do it.
And what's your idea about how this kind of story about ska music and a comic, or rather a graphic novel, which it eventually will be, syncs together? Because you might not imagine those two things hooking up, but they do, don't they?
How do you mean?
Well, just looking at the comic now, really stunning, beautiful pictures.
Yeah.
And let's just take, for example, tell us about this picture. This one here, what's the origin of that?
Okay. So this here is young Don Drummond. Story behind it is that he's skipped school for the day. He's wandering the streets, and he's got himself into a bit of a situation in downtown Kingston. There's the workers marching, and there's a police riot, and he's caught up in that since 1941. And he runs away from that situation, and he ends up in a yard, and there's a mento band. I should say at this point that because nothing is known about Don Drummond before he enrolled at Alpha Boys School, very little is known about him. So I had to create a story, and it was a sort of generic story based on the kinds of stories that I was hearing from other Alpha Boys and their childhoods. So it was a kind of composite of different things that I picked up along the way. I thought, okay, let's write a fun story. So I'm not in any way pretending this is true and happened to Don. This section of the story is completely like my imagination, basically. And I had him wandering into a yard, and there's a mento band. And I'd actually heard a recording of like a Bolivian leaf blower playing at a classical concert, blowing on a leaf with an orchestra. And leaf blowing is like the origins of all reed music, like you blow on a blade of grass like that, and you get a squeak. But that people played a leaf, and it's one of those universal things. There's all over the world, in like China, Latin America, all over Europe. There's recorded history of leaf blowing. Now, I have no idea if leaf blowing actually is a tradition in Jamaica, but I just decided to write that in because it is so universal, and I just thought it was really nice. Let's have him blowing like a tobacco leaf or something. And that's the origin of that story. That's his first moment of moved on. That's his first moment of making music, of finding that he could blow a tune.
I really love this picture. It's like the angel with the trombone. Tell us a bit about that. It's amazing. Can you see it, right?
Yeah, I might just tilt it slightly. I think the light's washing it out a bit. Yeah, so this is from the prologue, and this is where it gets really, really, really amazing creating comics. It's because you get these ideas, like a grain of an idea, and you don't really know if it's possible. So I had this idea of the prologue of a prison warden, Don Drummond's in his cell post the murder trial, and he's found dead in his cell one morning by a prison officer. Hey, Charles Benoit's listening. Hey, Charles. Cool. The angel drawing, my favorite image from the first issue. So I had this idea of he's found dead in his cell, and there's an angel playing a trombone, and his spirit is going up to the heavens and morphing into a hummingbird, long-tailed hummingbird, which is a theme throughout the story. And I just asked Konstantinos, can we do this? And this is where it becomes like a magical process, is because he came back with that. I mean, he went through quite a lot of evolution, but I just was completely knocked out when he came back.
And there's quite a lot of magical, would you call it magic realism? Bits going on.
Yeah, I'd call it magic realism, where it's unreality.
Like you've got these creatures, spiders and
different
animals in there. Let me find one.
Animals talking.
You've got the...
Well, that's actually a dream. That's a dream sequence. So that's not reality. That's not magic realism, because that's a dream. But yeah, magic realism is when you cross the border between reality and non-reality. Things kind of that can't really exist in real life happen in real life. Like dreamy stuff that goes on in reality.
You've got a bit of that going on.
Like this, like for example, Margarita's spirit above the dance, bursting out of the record player. And animals talking as a theme. Yeah.
So we're slightly running out of time. There's so much we could cover.
Well, we can go on a bit.
We can go on a little bit. Tell us how it's all going so far with the comic. You've had issue 1.
Yeah, issue 1 was crowdfunded in... This is issue 1. Crowdfunded in 2022. 225 backers on Kickstarter. And yeah, it's been it's a long slog. Comics making is a slog. It's like you've got to be in it for the long haul. But it's Yeah, I mean, it's very exciting. What was the question?
Well, tell us something about how many issues there's going to be before it becomes an actual graphic novel.
Okay, well, the plan is to make 200 pages, thereabouts.
Mm.
And depending on how much funds we've got available, we might need to do 7. I've told everyone that it's going to be 7 issues, but we might bring it down to 5. Same amount of content. I'd like to do it in less than 7, to be honest, and that's a lot of work. But let's see.
And then after the 5 or 7 issues, it would be bound together as one.
It'll be a full-length graphic novel, 200 pages. Yeah.
So issue 2 is out when?
Well, it won't be available until at least the end of this year.
Okay.
Yeah, there's still a lot of work to go. But we're crowdfunding live now. We've got 4 days left. Finishes on Thursday. So yeah.
So it could still make a real difference if people put in pledges now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah, it's, well, you can find a link on the page. But,
because the whole thing is really dependent on that, isn't it? It's all being maintained by the crowdfund.
It is, yeah. And I've got plans to make it, to start generating more income with it in the future. For example, the soundtrack. So we have this plan we've now got this soundtrack being created, which is going to be a 4-track EP. We're hoping to have a soundtrack with each issue. And the plan is to press it onto vinyl and to package the comic together with the vinyl record and to distribute into record stores as a kind of stealth way of getting it into record stores. So that's the plan. I don't know. It's a kind of wild one. It's a wild idea, but
tell us about fridge magnets and clothes patches.
Yeah. Okay. So, we hit our crowdfund target a few days ago, £6,500, and to acknowledge the milestone, we added a couple of new rewards to the crowdfund campaign, which was 2 patches designed by Konstantinos Pistorius, the artist we haven't spoken about yet, and 3 fridge magnets, which are really it's a funny thing to say, but they're really high quality fridge magnets.
They are beautiful. We can't show them to you, can we? You can see them on the crowdfund. Page. Yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah, thanks to the wonders of print-on-demand manufacturing, we are able to bring these items to you.
So you can get Scatterlight fridge magnets, Scatterlight clothes patches.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah,
and bring Kos in, who lives in Cyprus.
Konstantinos.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things about this comic that's been amazing is that it's given me this whole new connection to the island or to the country of Cyprus.
He's in Greek Cyprus.
He's Greek Cypriot. He lives on the Greek side. Cyprus has got a long, complicated, and tragic history. It's a divided country with a kind of a hot border running down the middle. It's got a UN peace zone right through the island. It's a big story, but we don't need to go into that.
But he brought sound system culture to Cyprus, is that right? The first person to do it?
Yeah, that's right. So he came to London in the 90s, studied fine art at St. Martin's, Central London.
Okay.
Got into reggae in the sound system culture while he was here, Josh Shaka and Abashanti and things like that. Then he went back to Cyprus and built his own sound system, and the first one in Cyprus. There's now maybe 4 or 5 sound systems over there. But he got sound system culture moving in Cyprus and is very involved with that whole scene. So that's why he was such a perfect artist, because he was doing tributes to Jamaican artists. But
he's steeped in the music. He's an amazing artist, but he's not comics, is he?
Well, he was doing
Doesn't
kind
have
of
a comic background.
no, not comics narrative, but his
Mm.
art kind of was sort of comics style. You know, like he was doing these. They're definitely like cool comics type art, but
Isn't there
not
some?
comics. He hadn't done comic storytelling.
Isn't there some story that you said that the advice you got from some kind of comic expert was one thing you should always do your first time? Never ever get an artist who's not already trained, already done comics.
Yeah,
So you had to break that rule because he was so good.
Basically, yeah. So somebody said to me that, especially since I'm a first-time comics writer and I'm learning about it, like the last thing you want to do is work with a first-time comics artist, because you know you're going to be both. It's like the blind leading the blind. You need at least one of you to know what you're doing. But I couldn't find anyone else as good as him who was so into the music and who wanted to do it so much. I tried to find a Jamaican comics artist and advertised in various forums. That person didn't materialize. But yeah, he convinced me to give him a try, and he did some auditions, sort of tryout pieces, and I just thought he was astounding, you know, and that he had what it took, and he loved, you know, he was already doing pictures of like the Scatolites and Uroy and 60s sound systems.
So you describe what you're wanting, like an image, a scene, and he just delivers that to you.
Yeah, but it's always kind of better than I'd imagined.
Mm.
So there's been very few instances where I've kind of gone, no, because it's not quite right. You know, that's fine if it's not. You know, he's totally fluid and able to take my input. But generally, you know, it's a really joyous experience because he comes back with things which I absolutely love. I'm like, oh God, and it's always different to how I'd imagined it. I'm always a bit taken aback and surprised because I have my picture of it, which is different to his picture. And I'm not very good at drawing sketches of how I want it. So I just describe it. I just write it. I write what I want on a script, and he does it. And it's always a joy to see what he comes up with, because it's always brilliant. And I think that's a great thing to have. It really shows, you know, people really feel in the feedback that we've had is that, you know, that
he captures something, doesn't he? He really captures something, a magic and a depth in the artwork. Yeah. Another interesting bit I think about the comic is the whole thing about the language, patois. Tell us something about your journey with that, because that's quite a thing to bring that to a comic and get that right, and yet do it in a way which people can still connect and relate to it.
Yeah. Well, it was a bold decision to go for the patois, and like phonetically spelled patois. And, you know, I tried doing it kind of patois light, and I wasn't really happy with it. And we pushed it. And I just kept thinking of, first of all, Train Spotting, and like that's a book written in heavy Glaswegian dialect, and it became famous for that. People loved it for that. And then I was thinking of Clockwork Orange. You know, that's a book which has its own weird language, and it didn't do it any harm.
So basically, presumably the publishers on those books took a massive risk to not water that down and keep it in the original dialect.
Yeah, the American edition of A Clockwork Orange, Charles told me this actually, if he's still listening. He told me that the American edition came with a lexicon at the back, but the British edition didn't. So there's all these weird words in The Clockwork Orange. I can't remember. Droog is one of them.
It's like a made-up language.
Yeah, it's a made-up fantasy language. It doesn't really mean anything. Or it does, because in the American version, it's got the translation. So we have a patois lexicon at the back. But my idea was that because it's close to English, but there's, you know, it's a sort of English, but it's not English. I wanted people to go auditory, so that after a couple of pages, you start hearing it in your head. And I would like it to have a recording eventually of a Jamaican actor or a couple of Jamaican actors reading it. But yeah, that's the idea, is that you switch your auditory faculties on and you start hearing it. And generally, like, people have said, you know, it's a great thing to have that. You know, a few people have said I struggled with it, but that's how Jamaican people speak, and I think it needed to be authentic. So it was translated by a couple. Um, he's English, she's Jamaican, and they worked on it together. Uh, but actually working with somebody else moving forward, yeah.
So what else? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. Anything else you feel to close on?
Just that this comic can only happen if people back the crowdfund. I mean, so I'm inviting people to go and take a look at the Kickstarter page. Head to Kickstarter, check out Trombone Man issue 2, or find it in the links in the blurb.
Maybe something we should say is the essence of the story itself. Don Drummond and his partner
Margarita. We haven't even mentioned Margarita.
Her.
Haven't even mentioned
but
Margarita.
Also that it's quite a dark story. It's about a murder. It's about someone going mad. How is all of that going to be pulled off through this thing without it being too dark?
Well, it is going to be really dark.
It is just going to be dark.
Well, I see it as kind of like Greek tragedy. I'm having to separate myself out from the truth of the fact that it actually did happen to someone, that she was murdered by Don Drummond. And it's a terrible, horrible, tragic story. But I'm seeing it more kind of like archetypally, in a sort of, like sort of Greek tragedy or Shakespeare or something, or in a kind of modern parable, maybe more like Sid and Nancy, something like that. But yeah, I mean, he descended into psychosis. He had mental health problems his whole life. We don't really know what it was. Probably schizophrenia, maybe bipolar, and maybe both. But he definitely went off the rails, and he had this partner, Margarita, who is a story unto her own. I mean, I really loved Heather Augustine's portrayal of her in her book on Don Drummond. I really thought she was this incredible character, and she's a very important person in the ska world in the early 60s. She was a key player, and I wanted to tell her story. And she made a record called it's called Woman A Come, and I first heard it when I was a teenager. So I'd known about her, all my adult life. I'd known about Margarita, and then when I read Heather's book and I had all these details about who she actually was, this Lebanese Jamaican and self-taught Rumba dancer, and this kind of wild, free spirit, I felt like I wanted to tell her story. And
she's going to be given plenty of space in the book.
Really is, yeah. I mean, in a way, I wished I'd call it the Don and Margarita story. I think as it evolves, you'll see that, she becomes a major player.
And Don Drummond himself, obviously, is seen as one of the greatest trombone players, would you say?
I think he's definitely one of the most emulated trombone players. I'm not in a position to say greatest or not. Definitely, I mean, I don't know of another trombone player who is as copied or emulated as Don Drummond. I mean, right now, anywhere on the planet, probably tonight, there'll be a ska band playing in, bars and clubs around the world, and there'll be someone playing a trombone, and they'll have been listening to loads of Don Drummond. And I don't know if you could say that about any other trombonist. Maybe someone like Fred.
Rico.
Well, yeah, Rico as well. That's part of the same tradition as Don Drummond, because Rico mentored Don Drummond at Alpha Boys School. But I was thinking maybe like Fred Wesley from James Brown's band, someone like that as a funk trombonist. There's a few who are like, they are the blueprint for a style of playing. But yeah, I'd say Don Drummond is probably one of the most influential trombonists and composers, composers.
Maybe we could close on, could you give like one or two recommendations for people who might not know Don Drummond's music, one or two tracks that you'd recommend either Don Drummond or where he's playing on the Scatterlights?
Yes.
Your favourites?
My favourites. Rain or Shine is a killer. Alipang is a great one.
And can you just find them on YouTube, Spotify?
Yeah. Man in the Street is his most famous tune. That's a great Don Drummond tune. Man in the Street. If you were just going to check out one Don Drummond tune, Man in the Street, and another one called Confucius.
Oh yeah, Man in the Street, Confucius, Rain or Shine.
Rain or Shine. If you go to my link tree, which I think there's a link for, you'll find. I'm pretty sure it's there. If it's not, I'll put it up there now. There's a link to my Mixcloud with the Don Drummond mix.
Oh,
go to
the Mixcloud and listen. That's a great thing you put together there with a whole load of Scatterlights and Don Drummond stuff. All right, maybe we're done.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening,
Charles. You're out there still.
Charles,
I just want to read his comments.
Yeah.
A Brief History of Seven Killings won a ton of awards and it was patois heavy. True. Within the world of ska and reggae, yes, Don Drummond is the foundation, but in the wider world of jazz, he's a notable star, but not among jazz greats. Yeah, that's totally agree with that. Yeah, not among. Yeah, in the world of jazz, there's J.J. Johnson and I don't know, loads of jazz trombonists. But like I said, I don't know if there's many other jazz trombonists who I could confidently say tonight or any night of the week, there's someone in a club playing in a ska band and emulating Don Drummond's style and Rico's style and Vin Gordon's style, the Alpha Boys School trombone sound. So it's that's the thing that I always say is just incredibly influential as far as actual musicians trying to sound like him.
It doesn't really matter, does it? Who's the greatest?
It's not a competition anyway. Who cares?
But he has an amazing quality and very emotional, isn't it?
Yeah. It's got that melancholic joy, pain thing.
Bittersweet.
Bittersweet. Like life.
Yeah.
Alpha sound, yes, 100%. He's with us. Charles is with us. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
On YouTube. Cool.
All right.
Charles, do you want to ask us a question before we go? Charles, let's give Charles a chance. I just want to say, if anyone's listening, Charles sent me a copy of Trombone Man, and he did this thing where, I don't know if I've got it to show.
Oh, he put it in the plastic thing.
He sealed it in a plastic, what's it called? I can't remember what it's called, Charles, but he basically archived it. He sent it off.
Listed. It becomes listed with the number.
Yeah, he archived it. So it's like a time capsule and priced, for the future. Graded. That's what he did. It's called grading for real comics geeks. And that was a real delight to receive that, Charles. Thank you. So I have a big plastic slab with a copy of issue 1 of Trombone Man in it. Cool. Any questions? Anyone out there with a question? Charles? No. We're gonna go. We're gonna over and out. Thank you. This is Mark, my brother. Thanks, Mark, for sterling work interviewing me.
Oh, he's got a question? Oh, he's
all set on questions. Great job.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Charles.
Okay, let's call this thing. Let's kill it. Bye, y'all. Thank you for listening, and loads of love. Peace out.
Bye.